Hello everybody, my name is David Copley and I work in a fantastic building called Sensor City, which is as good as it sounds, as you'll see. But the topic that I want to focus on towards the end of the presentation is about Industry 4.0 and how I've come to be involved in it and my interpretation of it. You'll hear thousands of different interpretations of it. Everybody's writing thought leadership on Industry 4 at the moment. Even Industry 5, so you could tell them to go away. They can wait their turn. We're on 4 at the moment. So it's nice to see you all out. I love a meetup and I do go to them in, around Liverpool and Manchester as much as I can. So it's really good to see people attending these kind of things. I'm just going to try and see if I can get my notes up. Okay, so thank you to Matthew for inviting me. Yeah, let's talk about Sensor City. So who am I and how did I get here? Well, my name is David Copley. My official job title is Industrial Systems Specialist, which is brilliant because being a systems specialist means that if somebody asks you like a hardware question, you can say, oh, I'm mainly software and I'm bigger than that. And then when they ask you a software question, you can say, well, I'm more of an electronics bias. So that's what I tend to spend my time doing. My background is in embedded systems and automotive electronics. So when I left university, I worked in marine electronics for a short period of time, and I got really into embedded systems and PICs and microcontrollers, to be honest. I then moved away from that, went into automotive, spent a bit of time doing testing and development, failure analysis, that kind of thing on ECUs, and then went to Bentley, which was a fantastic experience. So I was at Bentley for the past 7 years. Up until about 2 days ago last year when I came to work for effectively the university which I first graduated from. So that's how I got here. Why did I leave automotive? Well, I always like to tell people this because people think I'm crazy for leaving a fantastic place like Bentley where you got to test cars, fast ones as well. And there's a couple of things really. One, the OEMs in automotive get less and less control over the day-to-day innovation because it all has to be agreed 5-7 years in advance on platforms. So Bentley is part of VW Group, and of course there's Brexit connotations there, and there was a Dieselgate scandal, which nobody likes to talk about as well. So I could kind of see everything moving towards the suppliers. Suppliers were growing more and more powerful. Intel are moving very quickly by buying up everybody in the automotive supplier base. So I thought either I can really focus on software and go back to a supplier, or I can try my hand at something else. And this opportunity was amazing because it's the cutting edge, and it gave me an opportunity to see what everybody was doing all around me. High technology, which was always hard to force past the people that were keeping the accounts at a large OEM like Bentley. Okay, so this is where I work, and there's my office. If you're ever in Liverpool, you should definitely drop me a line, and I will come and give you a fantastic tour. I'm a very good tour guide now. Hello. So we've been in the building, as I say, just under a year now. We moved in while the builders were still there, so we've really got to know the place. And it is as good as it looks on that photo. No filter there, I promise you. So it's this is effectively a university enterprise zone. It was announced along with 3 or 4 others, I think, about 3 or 4 years ago. It's basically a collaboration effort. You can see the logos on the bottom there between John Moores University and Liverpool University. They both pitched in equal amounts of money, along with some money from Department for Business, Energy and Strategy. And eventually, Greg Clark, the Minister of BEIS, came to open us in October, the end of October last year. So this is a fancy video that's well worth watching.
Sensor City is a global hub for sensor technologies. It's a joint venture owned by the 2 universities in Liverpool. The aim here is to make available really fantastic equipment for small companies to come in and use them and really leapfrog them forward so that they can be a big success.
It's been really interesting for us to get in right at the very beginning.
We're creating a world-leading technology, and this is the best place to be to do it.
It's just the connections that you get from being in here, as well as the like minds and the innovation that comes with it.
Sensor City is the only place where companies can come together and work on sensor-related technologies and Internet of Things, and it's a national asset for the UK.
Okay, so that was the voice there of our Chief Exec, Alison Mitchell. She comes from BT OpenReach, I believe, and she's in charge of running the building and day-to-day operations. Okay, so that's essentially what we're there to do. Any SME or even large corporate that's wanting to be involved in sensor technology, thinks that sensor technology can advance what they're doing, we want to hear about it and be a part of it as well and help them grow. And the fact that we're supported by both universities means that we have access to some amazing knowledge in both of those institutions that's specifically focused on sensor technology. So we wanted to be a global hub, and that's pretty much what we've done. And you saw some of the equipment there that we get to play around with every day. Allows us to really push the limits of what normal SMEs wouldn't be able to achieve on their own. So we're basically an innovation space, and we want to springboard them using sensor technologies. That's the idea. We're located in the Knowledge Quarter, just as you get off the train, pretty much the same situation as this. And that's an amazing place to be, because Liverpool, as well as having a strong digital creative economy, so a lot of computer games developers are based in Liverpool, lots of people doing AR and VR, that kind of stuff, but also a biotech hub. We're right next door to Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. We've got both universities on either side of us, and we're right next to all of the Knowledge Quarter facilities, like I think the Clatterbridge Cancer Centre is just moving in down the road as well. The Royal Hospital is just up the road. So we want to be connected to all of those assets in Liverpool. That's very important, as well as the universities. So in October it was, we opened, and Greg Clark came to see us, and you can see a picture of me on the bottom left there. Luckily, I'd been practicing all morning on my surface mount pick and place operations, so I was able to actually have a conversation with him while I was dropping chips on boards. I hadn't had much practice before that, so I got the morning in practicing. But there's a lot of handshaking, and he got to see all of the equipment that has been paid for by the university and effectively his department as well. So that was very good. So as we go, we've been unboxing all of that beautiful equipment, and we've really had to learn from scratch, because some of it is so new in terms of technology. But as I said, that's exactly what we do. We're a space that's been purposefully designed to create a collaborative atmosphere. So that impressive building is supposed to be an industry-facing building. So a lot of people are put off often, or at least companies are often put off about working with universities. So this is very much an industry-facing venture that provides links into those universities. And it's designed so that everybody, hopefully, can work together in there and develop ideas together. New startups, new people employed, all of that stuff. So the bottom line there is pretty much what we're hoping for. Now, one actually interesting note on that is a lot of the companies that move in aren't necessarily traditional tech companies, and they're not necessarily using sensors in their day-to-day products. But pretty much as soon as they move in, they're thinking about it, because it sparks ideas. And one of the great things I found really early on, I think we're on about 10, 12 companies actually based offices in Sensor City now, quite a lot more hot desking as well as part of the community. But what's great is when you see the tenants walking around and knocking on each other's doors and then having a discussion about working on something together or combining their products in some way. Certainly with some of the healthcare people that have moved in, that you can see that happening all the time. So one person realizes how sensors can help augment their product, and then somebody else sees that same and they work together on. So that's the idea. We want to create a bit of a community, and the community isn't just the companies, and it isn't just the academics working with the companies as well. It's about upskilling the local community. I'll talk about a Shaping Futures bid, which we're a part of later on, but that's one of our first coding days where we built some little robots, and that's actually a drone that somebody brought along to fly up and take pictures of everybody. So we do in collaboration with other communities in Liverpool, especially maker spaces, we run little workshops and events that people can come to for free and learn to code together. And of course, those companies are there looking around at who they can employ, and that's great for them as well. Now we have a makerspace actually just round the corner, and I'm very passionate about makerspaces. One of the things I wanted to really do when I left key industry is to get more involved in that. They've actually just moved up the road, so they're even closer to us now. And the idea that the makerspaces can work with institutions like ourselves is really important, I think. So you've got the community feel in the makerspaces, hosting meetups and people really doing DIY stuff. But also if they need access to that equipment, we're just round the corner, and they can get it whereas they wouldn't be able to anywhere else. One of the things that we're quite keen on is challenge events as well. So even under a year the building's been open, we've hosted quite a few. One of the more interesting ones, Unilever, is actually on our doorstep. It's over the water. It's a massive place, and they've got an advanced manufacturing facility there, which is absolutely state of the art. We were lucky enough to go around it. But one of the things that we really want to do as part of these challenge events is take big companies. All of these are large corporations, international corporations actually, and we want to connect them with the SMEs. So one thing I found in my last line of work is that it's very hard to work with SMEs, especially in this country as well, when your supply chain is tied up in security, in contracts that have lasted for a long time. A traditional supplier base for automotive is in Germany, for example, in big companies like Conti and Delphi and stuff like that. So one of the interesting things here is when you see SMEs coming to pitch at these events where a large organization wants to engage. They say, well, we think we've got these problems and we'd like your ideas on how we might be able to solve them. And they have, in all of these cases, turned into genuine contracts and genuine good ideas that have been taken forward, even with SMEs working together and SMEs working together with each other in collaboration with universities. So there's lots of money there in Innovate UK, and then that provides an opportunity to provide a use case to Innovate UK to say, we've got a genuine need for this money. If we spend it, it's going to create wealth and it's going to create jobs as well. So it's very important. One of the latest ones we've done is in collaboration with Halton Housing. Halton is just down the river from Liverpool, and it's part of our region. And those guys are absolutely fantastic. They are really forward-thinking. They want to use technology as much as possible. Their main guy's got one of these really fancy software names, that Master of the Universe or whatever it is. So he engaged with us early on, and he said, I also want to run one of these hack days. And specifically, I want to use LoRaWAN to solve some of the challenges that we have and our tenants have about making things run more efficiently as a housing organization. So they really want to be beyond everybody else in the country. That's their target. So that hack day, I think, has just run in the last couple of weeks, and there are plenty of SMEs there pitching ideas based on LoRaWAN and working together as well, which is very important. Okay, so the knowledge, I've mentioned this a few times already, the knowledge comes from both the students and the academics who, especially in the academics case now, genuinely need companies to push their research forward. Research funding now isn't just stuff that you're never going to see. It has to have a purpose, and usually it has to have a company attached to it, especially with the likes of Innovate UK. So there's lots of money available, but you need to be working with somebody that can actually implement it further down the line and turn it into a business venture. Okay, so the assets, you saw a lot in the video, but I can talk a little bit later about when we actually started unboxing everything and throwing away the instruction manuals and then getting them back out the bin and trying to figure things out again. But the idea of the building is that you can go from a concept, just an idea, to a pre-production prototype. You can even do some pre-compliance in the building as well. So one of the main barriers to product entry into the market is compliance. It's so expensive, especially if you fail and you have to rerun some EMC testing or some dynamic testing that costs an absolute fortune. This helps you de-risk that, especially if you go through the program I'm going to talk about, which I work on. So this is that program, LCR4. The LCR part stands for Liverpool City Region, and the 4.0 is in reference to Industry 4. This is really what attracted me to the project. I think originally it was a 2.5 or 3 year project, and the idea is it's fully funded by the EU, so that badge has to be on everything we do. SMEs, however small they are, up until about 250 employees, where they're still classed as an SME, can get our support, our technical support. We can't actually hand over money, but our support has a value. So there's a state aid allocation which all companies have access to, and you would do very well to eat into that. So this is great news for small SMEs and even the medium ones to refine some of their processes or develop their products further. So our job day to day is to provide support to those SMEs by using the tech inside Sensor City. It's a £20 million project, so it's a big deal for the region, and it's been very, very successful. It's been called out specifically by Jürgen Mayer in the Made Smarter review, which was part of the review of industrial strategy for Britain. So this is a big deal, and we're hoping that it gets extended for another couple of years very shortly. So Sensor City is actually just one part of the puzzle, but before I show you, well, actually the other partners are along the bottom there, and I'll go through those in detail, but it has some very clear objectives, and these were set in stone at the start, and they're actually quite challenging when you first look at them. So we have to help in some way 300 SMEs in the Liverpool City Region. There's a picture just in the top right there. We have to create 70 new product development cases. So that's new products that haven't existed previously. We have to help develop those and create those. And we have to create 60 jobs, another challenging one, in the region. But I can say that halfway through the project, we're already well on the way to developing those goals, and I'm pretty sure we're going to hit those targets, maybe even exceed them in some cases. But that's the vision. We want to transform the region. It's a poor region, effectively, or most of it is. Manufacturing is very strong there, but it's in very selective industries. The likes of Unilever and Jaguar Land Rover just outside the region help prop it up. But we want to grow it, and we want to grow it in the SME base, not in the large corporate. Well, both would be ideal, but the SME base is the focus. So that's what we're about, very clear aims, and those targets are on our mind all the time. Quarter by quarter, we're delivering, each of the partners is delivering against those targets. So they are the partners. So you've heard about Sensor City, you've seen the fancy video. You might well have heard of Hartree Centre. They're part of STFC, the Science and Technology Funding Council, I think it stands for. So they're based at Daresbury Science Park, which is, again, an amazing facility further out around Warrington Way. The Hartree Centre deal with big data, cyber security, blockchain, cloud computing, all of that sort of stuff. I think they've got the fastest supercomputer in the UK just at the moment. I can't remember the name of that one, but that's their end of the spectrum. That's their commitment to LCR4 project. Liverpool John Moores University, they're involved in traditional manufacturing and product design, and so pure manufacturing and development. They have a good expertise in that, as well as sensors. The Virtual Engineering Centre is part of Liverpool University of Liverpool, and they focus on AR and VR technologies, and they've been doing some great projects. If you go online, you can find a load of videos of them creating hearts the size of rooms from models that they've done so that surgeons can analyze them in detail and stuff like that. So VR and AR are a big part of Industry 4. So that's their commitment to that project. And sorry if it seems a little bit patronizing, but I should probably cover how we got to Industry 4. It's quite a good slide. It shows the main components at each stage. So IoT, of course, Sensor City is interested in that. Big data, that's where Hartree come in. And cyber physical systems, which is a little bit to do with all of us. That's what we've got to now, and that's what we want to try and push. So we've noticed trends already in the region that nobody's really stuck on Industry 3, but a lot of people haven't yet made the jump to 4 and are a little bit unsure about how to do it. And that's why we're there, effectively. Okay, so where did the project come from? Just briefly, I think it was a study quite a few years ago to do with the local enterprise partnership. They were on that previous slide. They're actually a partner as well. And the idea of the LEP is that they bring in companies. We sit down together and try and figure out who can offer the best support. So they really are getting the best value for their state aid allocation. But the LEP, in combination with Cambridge University, did a study of like strengths and weaknesses of the region, and I realised that there is a traditional manufacturing base there. There is an element of digital capacity and digital innovation, and they tried to create this project to create a map of how we were going to sort that out, and that's where the partners came in, and that's where Sensor City came in as well, because sensors is a part of all of those technologies. I don't know if you've seen, as part of the industrial strategy, there's some grand challenges that need to be addressed as well. They include things like automotive and chemical industries, which with Jaguar Land Rover and Vauxhall on the doorstep and Unilever, all of those are answered by the big corporates, and we want the SMEs feeding into those big corporates as well. So this is a case study that we did with WaveReach.
We started off working with Hartree because they have a large number of small Internet of Things, IoT, sensors that are around the campus, the SciTech campus at Daresbury, and we essentially added some software to their sensors, and we then brought the data back from those sensors into the cloud services here, and then IBM's system analysed that data, and we got some extremely meaningful output. The nice thing about the Internet of Things technology is it is a global requirement, it's a global need. The benefit here is that we're able to work with the people at the SciTech Daresbury, and particularly with the Hartree Centre, because they have tremendous knowledge of the Internet of Things environment. They've got projects going on, and there are other companies within the campus that are putting a lot of effort into the Internet of Things environment. One of the major benefits of IoT technology is it tends to be much lower price per device than what we class as the traditional type of sensor and communication system. This is a tremendous place. It's a wonderful environment, and the benefit to us is that we're coming out with a sterling product. The benefit to the market is that they get something that is already fully tried and tested in a wide range of environments. It's a tremendous opportunity.
Okay, so that's an example of the kind of work that goes on. WaveReach approached Hartree, needed some assistance with analysing the data that was coming back from the sensors, and they were able to be supported in that. So again, the partners down the left-hand side, companies coming in through the LEP, and straight into the door of Sensor City, of course, as well. But they're the pillars that people traditionally talk about in relation to Industry 4. So between us, we pretty much think we've got elements of all of those covered. And that's why whatever the type of company it is, whether they're involved in digital media, not just traditional manufacturing, we're interested. And the use cases have been pretty wide-reaching, which I'll go through later on. So they're the pillars that you may or may not be familiar with. And the focus for Sensor City is, of course, those three. Systems integration, autonomous systems, which sensors are a part of, critical in fact, and the Internet of Things, which, again, sensors play a massive part in. So we've noticed in Sensor City that there's a big push towards innovative products and people developing new things. When we started this project, we thought we were going to get manufacturers walking in the door saying, okay, my production line is not as efficient as it could be, or I want to monitor the temperature in this particular thing. But what we found is, because of the equipment we've got, we're doing a lot of product development from scratch, because we can do the whole thing from concept to pre-production in one building. We can do the physical stuff in terms of taking CAD and 3D printing stuff to quite an advanced level, but we can also do PCB and circuit design as well. So that's the team that I work in, and the idea of the team, again, is to try and cover as many facets as possible. So between us, and we are one person down, so if you know an electronics specialist, I'd be interested to take a CV. But between us, we all have experience in different areas. So my area is systems, so like I said, I can be quite woolly about that, it's fantastic. My colleague, Magomed Muradov, he's a software specialist, and as part of his PhD, he won quite a few awards because he was working on developing new sensors for the food industry, which is pretty innovative stuff to be able to sense without intruding on the foodstuffs themselves. I have to be careful how much I can say about that one, I think. And Jamie on the right there is a proper product development engineer. So he loves doing lovely sketches and then turning them into real life using 3D printers. He really is a whiz in that respect. But companies often have different needs as well, which could be met by Liz and Samina in terms of marketing or looking at bids that the university can then be a part of. So it's not just the technical stuff as well. It can be marketing. So this is a bit of a preview of some of the stuff we've been up to. It's taken quite a while to figure out all of the stuff we've got, but an equipment list was put together to basically be as cutting edge as we could be. So here's some work I was doing on the pick and place with one of the companies I was working with. Again, monitoring some conductivity of water with a particular sense probe. But the little video on the bottom right there, very proud of that, that went in to basically create this part. So we can do the traditional PCBs, traditional circuit boards up to 6-8 layers. We have all the facilities in the electronics lab to do that. But one of the really cool pieces of kit we have, which is, definitely cutting edge, is the ProtoA system by LPKF. And you can see, you might be able to see there, the laser basically runs over the surface of the part. You 3D print a part, and then you coat it in a material, special material, which then you run the laser over to create the tracks. Those tracks aren't conductive at that stage, but then you plate it, and what comes out on the top right there is the circuit board. And you might say, why is that? Why go to all of that effort? But creating circuits in smaller, more confined places is becoming more and more important. So it's very important that we experiment with this kit and we try and push the boundaries a little bit more. So one of the use cases we're always given is BMW were using these on their steering wheels. So my interpretation of that is you've got the curvature of the steering wheel, you can't fit any more electronics in the middle, which is something that we struggled with in the past. So you can go onto the curved surfaces and still create those components around the edge. Gives you a more elegant design. And of course, with wearables where you've got more complex form factors, that's going to come in handy. So we've started to really play with this kit a little bit more. It's £250,000 on its own, I think. We're a little bit afraid of it at first, but it's the only one in the UK that you can get access to that isn't behind closed doors by F1 teams or military. So SMEs could legitimately walk up and say, right, we want some help with this, we want to work on this, and yeah, that's what we do, that's what we're about. Okay, so these are the kind of things, I skipped over this before, so this is the kind of stuff that my team in particular is interested in. We try and create cover the whole suite, especially in product development, because unlike the other partners, we're creating something physical quite often in our labs. Okay, so this is one of my favorite case studies. This is one of the first projects we worked on as well. So there's a company called CNC Robotics in Liverpool, and I hadn't heard of them before. If I had, I would have applied for a job because my degree was actually in robotics. But I didn't realize there was a robotics company in Liverpool. And they're a fascinating company because they buy in robots and then set up production systems. So these are true industry for material as a company. They're only a small outfit, but they're very, very busy and getting busier. When we first approached them, they said, well, to be honest, we're very good. We know about robots. We think we're one of the best integrators in the country. We set up production lines for really big manufacturers and we know what we're doing. And we said, well, the point of the project is to try and take things a little bit further. So what is it that when you're trying to go to sleep at night, you think, oh, I wish I had enough time to do that. And that's where LCR4 can come in handy. So they went away, and full credit to them, they had to think about a couple of different options that they've always had in the back of their minds. What if we could do that? And one of them is, KUKA is their supplier of choice for robots. They believe that they're the best in the world. So that's what they use. And all of the robotic manufacturers now are going Industry 4. So they're connecting those robots across the world so that you can plug into them and monitor them from wherever. But a lot of people aren't willing to invest in those new, very expensive, overpriced in a lot of cases, systems. They want to just add to the systems that are already there. So that's what we set about doing. We tried to take the data out of the spindle which sits on the edge of the robot to monitor key attributes. One of the examples they gave is that they have robots all over the world actually now. Some of them in Singapore. If that robot goes down in Singapore, that robot is down until they can get through to somebody in Liverpool and then try and explain what might have happened that led to the failure. CNC robotics have to figure it out remotely and just via a conversation. So our idea was that if you can take this system, add it onto the systems that are already out there, then it saves investing millions in new robotic systems and changing your production line around. So that's an example of how we can do it. So we didn't take the whole product development because that's a couple of years as a project. But what we did was we proved it was possible. We used LabVIEW in this instance. Magomed from his previous project had a lot of experience with LabVIEW, and it's perfect for being able to create little UIs and be able to read sensor data. But what's interesting about this project is it also changed the business model of CNC robotics as well, because they realized that they could add this as a preventive maintenance option. If my robot's running hot, they can pick up the phone and say, whoa, steady on, you've changed your process, something's gone wrong, your robot's about to go down. So that'll save downtime. Perfect. Okay, so this is another project that I'm working on at the moment. Basically it's about IoT wearable devices with the hope of going into care institutions and probably including the NHS as well. And one of the things that I've really struggled with is when we're talking IoT, everything has to be about power, and this is a good example of that. So I've gone back to my picks, which I know and love, and they've come a long way since the early days when I used to work on them, but it's still about how much battery life can we get out of this thing before it has to be changed, because every penny counts in something like the NHS. So this is a good example as well. On the sensor point of view, I really like this one as well. Feedwater are probably medium to large size SME. They're a chemicals company traditionally, but they realized that their chemicals were been supplied and dosed by pumping systems that didn't belong to them, weren't designed by them. So they wanted to have more control over that process. So they started a KTP, which is a knowledge transfer partnership with Manchester Metropolitan University. So they got a really bright student in, and they said, right, we want to design our own system based on theirs, and we want to fit these sensors to it. We want to monitor all of these things and dose our chemicals. In the long term, it would be ideal if then they could monitor that system remotely, because sometimes these big industrial plants which need water filtration systems so that Legionella doesn't occur and the right conductivity levels are present, they want to be able to make sure that they never run out in case somebody forgets to order. If they can trigger that order automatically, that really helps Feedwater as well as their customer base as well. It's an add-on service that comes as part of Industry 4. It was very challenging because of the type of sensor, but because of the facilities we've got, we were able to analyze their boards further and then dig out the data from the sensor, which, because they're moving into a new area, they weren't able to do. Real space is just on here basically because it's a completely different part of 4IR. So Rob has created a single reality optical headset. Now, even if you ask at the end, I won't be able to explain this probably. Rob's tried to tell me about it many times and I still don't really understand. But basically it reduces eye strain. It's not an electronic device, but it looks like a VR mask that you wear. And it basically tricks the brain into not having to recalculate distance using the eyes. So it reduces eye strain. So it's going to be great in long medical procedures and things like that, in long operations. But we have an optical laboratory as well. So as well as being able to 3D print prototypes, which we created for Rob, we can then calibrate those later on in the optical lab once he's ready. If you go on the Sensor City website, which I encourage you to do or come in, you will see these suits everywhere. This is one of the more interesting projects we've been involved in. Terry from Aqua Running came to us with these suits. They're basically like wetsuits, neoprene wetsuits with flotation devices in. So they hold you in a position which you're able to train in the pool. So Terry has a leg amputated, and he realized that these flotation belts that he was using to keep fit and keep training after his operation just weren't sufficient. So he created a whole suit that holds you in the water, and there's people all over the world using these, which is quite interesting. So he has a contract with Real Madrid. I think the one you see there has probably got their colours on it, I think. So the Real Madrid players use these to train, and now he's had so much popularity, so the New York Times was in early on in the project. So he's supplying those suits all over the world. So we helped him redesign the pads because he doesn't have any engineering background. He's not able to create those pads, and he was sending the suits out to China to get them made. So we were able to provide them with CAD data, which for Terry would have been very difficult, and he'd had to pay for some other way, but we can fund it all for free under LCR4. So that's an interesting one. Terry's an interesting case because it goes even further. The idea of being in Sensor City is that he needs to be able to monitor things out of that suit when the players or people in rehab are training in the pool. So that's the tricky bit, because there's sensors around that will do that today. Lots of wearable sensors. A Fitbit, I guess, is the starting point for that. But then getting that data out of a pool while the person's moving is slightly more complex. And that's where a joint bid with the universities comes in. LJMU has a specific expertise in sports science, like one of the world leading ones, I think. And UOL has, again, sensor expertise. So that's how he gets access to those sensors. So what are our day-to-day challenges? I'm not exactly sure why I put that slide up, but it does, I think if you cut my head open, that's what it would look like at the moment. So one of the things, other than the high volume of targets that we have to work through, is we find that people come and they don't always have an engineering background, but they've got an idea. And turning that into reality is fine when you've got a whole team of engineers, but we're quite a reduced team. So we do have the backing of researchers and academics in the university, but what these companies are coming in with is often a whole product development cycle. So certainly on my side, I'm not strong enough in software and cloud stuff to be able to really take the data that I'm getting out of devices and send it on. So Mo's a little bit stronger in that area, but we do feel that's a skill that the team is lacking a little bit at the moment. So one of the things that we're seeing is, like I said at the start, we were expecting we would be going into purely manufacturing bases and looking at conveyor belts and monitoring heats of lasers and things like that. But quite often we're doing product design cases. So it's quite intensive on time. Okay, so where do sensors come in? So like I said, not every company is looking directly at sensors, but they might be using an off-the-shelf piece of kit. But these are basically the trends that I've pulled out over the last year of working with various different companies and some of the challenges that we face. So I regularly meet with members of the RF and microwave group at Liverpool John Moores University, and they're doing some really, really interesting things, especially with remote sensing and building up microwave sensors so that there's no impact. The medical implications of that are fantastic. And the design and simulation tools are improving all the time. Together with machine learning, you can really start to pick out very, very small changes and very small details in things that you weren't able to measure before. So that's interesting. In terms of MEMS devices, quite a lot of our clients are already using them in lots of different cases, but specifically, again, in healthcare. So getting the data out of those devices is absolutely a piece of cake these days because there's so many prototyping platforms around. That's where we start. We don't design anything from scratch if we can help it. Sorry? Oh, sorry, I did mean to put that on there. Micro-electromechanical system. So it's basically, some people call them a system on a chip. So there's a physical interaction going on in that chip, and it's an electrical output is occurring that we're monitoring. Yeah, so like a gyro or magnetometer, those kind of sensors. And the interesting thing about those is they're all converging and they're all going onto a chip together so that you can get some really interesting use cases out. There's a tenant in Sensor City that's using that in a pendant so that they can, people that have had spinal surgery and they need to recover at home can make sure that they're doing their exercises, and then that data can be sent to the doctor so that they can review the progress. That's just holding a pendant because you can infer movement of the spine and movement of the body from that pendant. So that's one of the early products we took on, actually. So one of the things that we keep seeing again and again is this thing has to last forever. I've heard that so many times. This has got to last at least 10 years. And that's fine in theory, but then when you add the list of requirements, and especially when you start getting into security, that's where you start eating away at battery power. And that's why one of my favorite topics, LoRaWAN, comes in handy, especially in the smart cities approach. So energy harvesting, I think this is really, really exciting time for energy harvesting. And especially for the smart cities approach, this is going to be really, really crucial. So harvesting of RF is still a relatively new field, but the technology has improved to a point now where you can have dumb sensors sat in buildings, wherever, and activating those devices using RF can wake them up and tell you whatever you need to know, just enough. And I have seen it demonstrated with LoRaWAN as well. So that's very interesting if you can have a device that can communicate on its own and sit out in the field just harvesting RF, so long as that RF is around somewhere. So great for cities, at least. Yeah, and mesh networks as well. I see a lot of people developing products now that need to communicate en masse. And Bluetooth 5 will really push that forward. And I think all of the new smartphones will start to see Bluetooth 5 come with that now. So yeah, security. This comes up at every talk I give, and every talk I've heard, it's always a question, what do we do about security? And I think it's still an open question. There's lots of different ideas, but no one good solution yet. But what we see every time is it comes in at the end, and we need to be designing it in from the start. Now, what level that has to be from the microcontroller, my favorite part of the system, the microcontroller level, I'm not exactly sure yet, but I think good design is the starting point. Doing DFMEAs, which are a favorite of automotive, can really make sure that you design the system in a way that if something starts to go wrong, it can detect and go into a fail-safe mode. That's the simplest form of protection, I think. So what does it mean for manufacturing? Well, yeah, manufacturing is still one of my keen sort of passions, because I come from just down the road, actually, in Rotherham. So that's a traditional manufacturing town that's kind of fallen on hard times over the last 20, 30 years or so. Steel industry was in decline. So I am still very interested in manufacturing, and what I see here is there are a lot of manufacturers starting to build up. I think Liverpool bucks the trend. Liverpool City Region bucks the trend in manufacturing at the moment, which is quite interesting. But it's not there's not a lack of willingness there. So I do believe things are starting to shift, especially with LCR. Just talking about LCR gets manufacturers engaged and gets them thinking about what they can do. This second point is quite key for me. Often there's people there that want to do innovative things, and I saw this in industry all the time. We started using pies to do clever stuff all the time. But there's kind of skill silos. So one person on their own doing really cool stuff doesn't necessarily have all the skills. So it's really important to engage with people right across the company to try and make things happen. I think that's really interesting. And some of the projects we've worked on, especially the CNC robotics case, makes me think of this last point, where preventative maintenance becomes predictive maintenance, because that's where we should be going. We should be applying machine learning, and we should be applying AI where it matters to stop us fixing things. Once they're broken, we should be fixing things before they break. And there's an interesting case study that Brainboxes have done, which is a little LCR company that's been on our program as well. And if you have a little Google of them, they're doing some really cool stuff with RS about automatic resupply and predictive maintenance. So definitely check that out, it's really interesting. Okay, so I talked about skill silos, and skills always comes up at these kind of talks. We want to do Industry 4, but we don't have people. And that's just a well understood fact. So everybody's doing something about getting kids coding in particular, but not just kids as well. People out of industry are coming to code clubs that we're hosting, and that's a really good sign. People are going, well, I've never done code before. My girlfriend's one of them actually. I think I want to learn code. Well, you're not going to use it every day in marketing, but it's really cool to be going down that angle to have a greater understanding of it. So we're part of a Shaping Futures bid, which is really fantastic. It's got some great partners in it, Girl Geeks in particular. And it's really about trying to show what the capabilities are in the region and how easy it is to get involved. There's so much stuff out there on the net. So we want to try and push that as much as possible. And we want to keep employers engaged as well with these groups, so they can pick people out and get them started early on and get them interested in STEM. So that's a really interesting project that we're involved in at the moment. 5G. So this is hot off the press, basically. Sensor City's just been awarded a 5G bid, which is part of a government strategy to push 5G. And I think this is really important, especially where smart cities are concerned. So Sensor City is the lead partner. There's a bunch of other partners as well, but basically our remit is about healthcare, so preventing loneliness in certain communities and making people safe in their own homes rather than having them in hospitals all the time. So the partners include the NHS and SMEs, both in our building already and in the community as well. And this is going to be really important. So after this first year of testbed trials, I think it goes on to a bigger trial, but I'm very interested in how this shapes the smart city approach from Liverpool, because that's one of my key interests. So originally I was going to talk about smart cities. I have lots of opinions on smart cities, but I probably have I'm more qualified to talk about Industry 4. So happy to answer lots of questions on this as well. And I did mean to check up on where Leeds was up to, because you can usually get a bit of a feel on the net for different cities doing things in different ways. I do think that Liverpool has been lagging behind, but I've been talking with lots of partners, lots of SMEs and people in makerspaces about how to address this. And there's some interesting projects going on. One I really want to highlight, which I think is quite cool, makes use of open data, which is a common thread as well. Manchester do this, Liverpool do this as well, although I think It's a little bit out of date now, but using open data, people publishing data en masse into CSVs, into Excel files, whatever, and then it been used in a really useful way. This is a great example from Red Ninja, who were a local SME, really innovative, and again working with Sensor City. They took that open data and they managed to make ambulances more efficient in terms of getting to people, because they can change lights ahead of where they're getting to clear the roads of traffic. That's so simple, but it is smart cities in essence, and it's a really practical way of making a difference. So I've also been talking to there's a guy doing a PhD, and he works at the council planning office actually. He's doing a PhD in smart cities, and we were having a conversation the other day about how we can really boost things and move things forward in Liverpool. And his PhD has been all about looking at how town planning and legislation affects smart cities, and it seems to have a large effect. So if your planning is very stringent and usually quite out of date, it takes about 5 or 7 years to get these things through, it can really hinder you in terms of developing smart cities, because it has to be flexible, it has to change with the times, and it has to move with the people that are in it and the technology as well. And probably one of my favourite topics at the moment is about low power networks, wireless networks. So LoRaWAN is, we're hosting LoRaWAN gateways around the city. I think Manchester still has more, but hopefully we can catch up. And I wanted to do a little bit of an experiment on my journey. It didn't go exactly to plan, but I set up a little LoRaWAN device when I left. Unfortunately, I think I put the wrong code in it, so only about when I got to, well, just after I left Manchester, I managed to reset it and start getting LoRaWAN packets. But if you look at how LoRaWAN is mapped across the country, there's a really interesting corridor, which I think was discussed at Hebden Bridge actually when we were there last year, Matt, between Liverpool going to Leeds and I think further up north as well. There's a really nice line of gateways, so that coverage is really going to help with the whole smart cities idea. I'm really passionate about that. In Leeds, I believe there's an internet exchange as well. I don't know if you've talked to those guys. The Leeds Internet Exchange, yes? So we now have one in Liverpool as well, and we're very proud of that, and that's going to be very important, along with the 5G, in terms of giving people fast connections to be able to achieve some of these smart city goals that we're looking at. And that's about it, but I skipped over a lot of the technical stuff, so please fire questions at me and find out what you need to know. Thanks very much.